All right, everybody, today we have the pleasure of hearing from Jim Lange, who is a CPA and an attorney, and he helps people throughout the United States, and he specializes in helping parents of students with special needs. Welcome, Jim.
Thank you for having me, Jess.
Oh, my pleasure, my honor. Thank you. So, Jim, tell us how did you get started helping families with special needs?
Well, actually, it was by necessity. So I've been a CPA and an estate attorney for over 35 years. And then my daughter, who's now 29 years old, developed dysautonomia, which is a malfunction of the autonomic nervous system. And it is, unless there's some kind of major reversal, she will never be able to work. So the issue for my wife and I was, okay, we probably have sufficient resources to provide for our daughter for the rest of our lives, but then what happens after we're gone? Well, this is some special planning. And frankly, my background is both a CPA, really strategic tax planner type, and an estate attorney was particularly appropriate. We developed what I think is the best plan for our daughter. The difference, not even including government benefits, given the same assumptions, interest rates, spending, everything else, is without the planning, our daughter ends up with broke, out of money, with it 1.9 million. And it's basically, and this isn't life insurance, this is basically a transfer of money from Uncle Sam to our daughter. And after I realized, oh, okay, everybody's different, but the three steps are all the same. I want to spread this information to as many parents who have a child with a disability, or for this audience, maybe a disability, but maybe not so bad that they won't be able to work. Like my daughter may be on the borderline, or maybe like some of your clients who, after going through your program, do learn to read better and do learn to live productive lives and get jobs, etc. But not everybody does. So I'd like to maybe address both people, those folks, and then also folks that might not be as fortunate as your clients, or might not have dyslexia. They might have something else. But anyway, the short answer is I did it for my daughter, and then I wrote a book about it. I got two great co-authors, and the one who knows more about SSI and SSDI qualifications than anybody I know. She literally, she was the disability commissioner under H.W. Bush. Julia Steinbacher, who's just wonderful for estate planning for special needs kids, so we wrote the book. It's my mission. I want to give it away. I want people to have this information even for free. We're putting on a summit. We'll give you, let's say, ways that your audience can get this for free. But anyway, that's how I got into it.
It's so many of us get into helping other people because of our own personal experience. That's the same for me as well. My journey began just trying to help my own kids. And then here I am interviewing you, who also wanted to help your daughter.
Yeah, and I think it's great, and I get it. And I suspect that you're the same as me, which is not that you don't care about money, but if you can really help people, at least at my age and stage after a successful career, I'm just delighted to do it. And frankly, I would rather help somebody. If I found out, for example, 5 years from now, somebody came up to me, or even a year from now, and said, hey, I didn't have the money to afford anybody's services, but I got the book and I went through it and I did the steps, and now my kid is on a much better track than they would have, that would give me more satisfaction than a paying client who, I saved their rich kids $1 million.
Tell us, what are some of the secrets to helping children or adults who may never be able to work, or may never be able to earn the kind of money that we as parents hoped for them?
Well, there's three things, and we'll do them in order. and then I'll come back and talk about if you don't qualify for at least the first one. So the first issue is, will your child qualify for SSI or SSDI that Debbie McFadden calls the golden ticket? The child will then be able to qualify. If they qualify for that, and you have to go through the Social Security Administration acceptance, they will get health care like Medicare. They will often get state benefits depending on the disability. They could get specialized computers, specialized equipment. They might get vocational training. And there's enormous estate planning benefits for after you die. So the first thing is, do you have a chance at qualifying for SSI or SSDI, which Debbie McFadden calls the golden ticket? She did a wonderful job describing that, giving some really good information. Here's, by the way, the one tip that I didn't know that would have been helpful when we were applying for my daughter, and we were initially rejected, which is, you don't want to tell them how wonderful your kid is. You want to tell them all the things your kid can't do. So one of Debbie's daughters, well, they're both Olympic champions. One has spina bifida, doesn't have the use of her legs. The other one is a above the knee amputee, and she's a world-class rock climber. She can get up a flight of steps, but she can't get up a flight of steps like you and I. So when Debbie's applying, she didn't say, oh, she's a world-class rock climber. She said she can't do a pair of steps the way normal people do it. It's what she can't do, not what she can do. So that's the first step, is, can you get your child qualified for SSI or SSDI?
And how do you find out if you can?
Well, the traditional route is you hire an attorney. Although interestingly, to do this kind of work, you don't have to be an attorney. That's what people usually do. Then there's people who try doing it yourself. The rejection rate is like 70 or 80%. So I don't like to pack my own parachute. I would probably use an expert in this area, because the difference between getting accepted and not is hundreds of thousands of dollars, maybe much more than that over the child's lifetime. It sounds like a pitch, but Debbie McFadden is as good as anybody that I get. I predict she's going to get so busy that, she's probably going to have to expand, and nobody that she can hire could ever be as good as her. But anyway, seeing some professional to help you, or if you're a complete do-it-yourselfer, then get the book and do what Debbie said. Debbie didn't hold back. She didn't say, oh, I'm going to just give them the mediocre information. She is like me. She wants to present the best information she knows how, which is what she did in the book. The second step, it is mission critical to get your estate planning right. And this is where it gets pretty tricky, because, I know that that the work that you do, if people go into your program, you typically see dramatic improvements to the point where somebody came in not able to read, and then they leave being able to read and presumably be able to get a job. But that might be your business, but that's not your podcast. So I want to address everybody that might be listening.
Well, and as you were speaking, I'm thinking about one of my clients who, her son is in our program, but she has another son who she has called me crying about not knowing what to do. And as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking she needs to listen to this podcast, because this will help her son, who's in his 20s, who is incapable of working, and they live in Nevada where they're not receiving any services, but SSI is federal. So
yeah, that's right. And so the first thing I would do in her situation is to get the child who isn't in your program qualified for SSI, which I mentioned. The next thing that and I'm going to say all your listeners need to do, is to get appropriate wills and trusts.
Yes.
Right now we might be fine. On the other hand, most of us drive cars. We are at risk. Something could happen to us. what happens to your child. And I'm going to oversimplify it and kind of go straight to the answer. So let's say that your child is on, let's say, some type of spectrum with some type of disability, whether it's autism, dyslexia, or whatever it might be. And let's just say that the one situation is your child maybe is dyslexic, but can read at the 11th grade level, can get a job and will be okay, but you're still a little bit worried about the decisions they're going to make, and they're not going to be able to maybe get a job that makes as much as you do. So you want to protect that child, and you have there's relatively standard protective trusts that both protects the child from themselves, protects the child from a future ex-wife, or husband, meaning if they marry the wrong person and then they get a divorce, the money is protected, and also other creditors. Fairly standard, and that might be appropriate for a lot of people. Now, let's take the example of the person that you just said, hey, the kid can't get a job, and let's assume that they will qualify for SSI, which will give them a government benefit, will give them health care, will give them special estate planning rights after your client is gone. That child pretty clearly needs a special needs trust. And the purpose of the special needs trust is to provide a source of money for the child, but you want to protect the government benefit. In the first place, we weren't trying to protect the government benefit. This time we are, okay? So it's called a special needs trust. It must meet 5 specific conditions in order to qualify as a designated beneficiary of an IRA. It must meet a bunch of other conditions in order to maintain the government benefit, but at the same time have money available for the child. Now, one of the problems that a lot of people face when they are making a will is, gee, I don't know how my kid is going to do in the long run. Maybe they're going to be okay and they're going to get a job and they're going to be all right. Maybe they're not. So do you do this special needs trust that's very restrictive but preserves the government benefit? Or do you do this traditional, let's say, creditor protection trust? And the answer is a lot of people don't know. And one of the reasons I wanted to be on your program is to say one of the solutions for people who don't know, and the other thing is things could change. Maybe you have a brain injury, maybe it gets worse, maybe it gets better. Dyslexia, if they find you, maybe they get better, maybe they don't find you and the kid can never get a job. Or maybe, like you said, they have another sibling or whatever it is. So if you have a choice between these two trusts and you don't have a crystal ball that you know how your child's going to do, there is something called a toggle. And basically, it lets the trustee decide what type of trust, and he makes that decision not today, but after you're gone. So let's use the example of your client who has the child who clearly has a disability, clearly could qualify for this benefit. All right. Well, clearly, but I don't know, maybe he gets better. So what you do then is you let the trustee decide after you're gone. So your client and their husband or wife die, and we say, okay, how's the child doing now? Well, unfortunately, the child never really was able to adapt. The child is on a government benefit, needs to preserve a government benefit. We're going to use the type of trust that protects the government benefit. Or let's say it goes the other way. Oh no, the kid's doing great, learned to read, and he's working construction, and we still want the trust, but we want the trust to have as liberal provisions as possible. Oh, okay, well now we go to the more traditional one, and you make that decision later, not now. And I, at the risk of plugging my book, which I'm actually going to offer to your audience for free, on page 244, there is a discussion of that will help clients understand how they should um, prepare their wills and trusts, etc. And the other thing, I don't have a law firm anymore, so I have no ulterior motive here. It probably makes sense to go to a specialist, that is somebody who's done 100 of these, instead of somebody who's done one or two, because there's a lot of associated issues. Sometimes, where's the child going to live? Who's the guardianship issues? And sometimes it just makes more sense to be aligned. And then the other thing is, who's going to give advice to the trustee over time? I'd rather go to an attorney that has done 100 of these than has done one.
And how do you recommend finding that right attorney?
Well, that's a tough one. Usually, bar associations will limit the attorney to only do wills and trusts for people who are residents of the state where that attorney is licensed. I happen to be licensed in Pennsylvania, and even if I still had an active law firm, I could not be the lawyer for somebody who isn't from Pennsylvania. And again, it's going to sound self-serving for one of the co-authors, but Julie Steinbacher, who's a Pennsylvania attorney, and she's not licensed in anywhere other than Pennsylvania, but she has kind of a flock of attorneys, and we know some. We don't know 50 states. It's possible our office could refer you to somebody. It's more likely Julie's office could refer you to somebody, because she works with people that have that specialty. And then of course the other way is to do your own research. The problem, and I would say that this goes for almost anybody, is how do you distinguish between a good and a lousy attorney? And I hate to say it, but as part of our service, which we always review the wills and trusts of our clients, and I'll tell you, I'm happy with about none of them. There's almost always major changes I want to do. In fact, people are hiring me for strategic planning, and usually the first thing, and I always ask for their will, and I actually read it and I look into the details. I almost always recommend wholesale changes to their will and estate plan, even if they went to a specialist. So that's a tough one. And unfortunately, the difference between getting the estate plan right, so for example, if you have an IRA and you're leaving it to a child with a disability, if you have one wrong provision and you have $1 million in your IRA, the difference of leaving $1 million to the child, if between getting it right and having the child stretch that inherited IRA over their lifetime and getting it wrong, that could be like $1 million to the kid. And of course, you're long gone. You never knew what was coming. But finding the right attorney is mission critical. I wish I had a easy way. And just because somebody has a specialty or a designation, that doesn't necessarily mean that they know it. In fact, unfortunately, a lot of people, and sometimes, with the best of intentions, want to serve a particular audience. And maybe they're very good with that type of audience, but maybe they don't know some of the other things. Like, I know about the 5 rules that in order to qualify as a designated beneficiary of an IRA, because we've been drafting trusts for people who don't have disabilities for many years, and we have to get that right. And it's really important to get it right if you have a child with a disability, because here, to oversimplify why this whole area is so important. All right. Let's take, for example, going back to the client that you have, and let's oversimplify and say one child's going to be fine and one child is not. If you mess up the estate for the child that's going to be fine, presumably he could go out and get a job and support himself. Mm-hmm. And let's say you screw it up and the kid ends up with a couple $100,000 less. That's real bad. But it's not a real tragedy, because presumably he'd be able to support himself by getting a job. The other kid, you mess that up, and that kid ends up with $300,000, $500,000, $1 million less than he could have if the planning was done right. So instead, he's out of money and he gets a small government benefit. That is tragic. So it is mission critical to get the planning right if you have a child who's either somewhere on the spectrum or has a disability. Frankly, I've spent 35 years helping clients. The vast majority of them, their kids were fine, and now I'm doing the strategic part because I think I'm qualified to do it for parents whose kid might not be okay. And it becomes mission critical to get that right.
Yeah. And so you had said that there were 5 points that needed to be addressed.
I'd love to go through them technically, but I know we are time sensitive, and frankly, you almost need to get an attorney to get that part right. So
Okay.
I hate to not answer a question, but I really want to provide value for as much time as we have, and that would not be. So
Absolutely. I appreciate that. All right. So what do you recommend with the time that we have remaining that parents do to guarantee their kids?
Okay, well, so number 1, SSI, SSDI. Number 2, get the estate planning right. And then number 3, only when you have both of those, although sometimes you do 2 and 3, you get to my area of expertise. So there's a lot of different strategies, but here is one of the mission critical strategies. And as a result, again, our daughter will be $1.9 million better off. And it's a strategy a lot of people know about, but they don't know the huge benefits if you have a child with a disability, which is to make a series of Roth IRA conversions. Without getting too technical, if your child qualifies for SSI and SSDI and you die and you leave your traditional IRA or your Roth IRA to your child, again, going back to the example of that family, the one child who isn't collecting SSI and SSDI, that child will have to take out all that money within 10 years after your client's death. Their sibling who did qualify for SSI and SSDI can stretch that inherited IRA, or better yet, that inherited Roth IRA where the distributions are income tax free over their lifetime. If the beneficiary is a trust and trusts pay at the highest rate, having a Roth in that trust that is tax free can just make an enormous difference. And it's probably going to be good for you and your spouse, but I would say it's mission critical for you to do it while you're alive and plan for an inherited IRA or inherited Roth IRA to become the underlying asset as the beneficiary designation of that IRA or Roth IRA. Now that's one strategy, and I wish, and I've taught this stuff literally for 8 hours just on Roth IRAs, but there's a whole slew of other strategies. But most of the strategies that I talk about, the other 2 really are protecting government benefits. I've kind of says, okay, whether the kid gets a benefit or not, what transfer of assets am I making? I center on transferring assets from the IRS to your child, and not just for your lifetime, but more likely over the child's lifetime, which my daughter, for example, with dysautonomia, she could survive us by 40 or 50 years. So this isn't a short-term thing. Mm-hmm. And the other thing that I'll mention about the benefits of getting this planning right is one of the problems that we have as parents is we worry, and our anxiety level is through the roof. And my wife and I, what are we going to do after we die? How's Erica going to be able to be okay? Now, we still worry, but we don't worry about the financial part because we've taken care of that. And interestingly enough, our daughter, I didn't realize how anxious she was about money. And I actually interviewed her and she said, gee, I knew you were going to take care of me, Dad, but I didn't know how, and I didn't know if you could do it enough. And now that I realize that you figured out a program and put it in place for me, and now you want to go and tell the world, hey, we have this great program. Her anxiety level is way down, and she actually wants to help. Let's say promote the book and promote a podcast that a simulcast that I'm doing, where we're going to have a 3-day virtual summit of different experts that will help parents with a disability. But I'll just say that is one of the, let's say, hard to define benefits, is reduction in anxiety.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's one of the key points that we offer with tutoring, is we help with confidence. Same thing, because if you have anxiety or confidence issues in the way, you can't live a full life.
Right, but in a way, my job's easier, because it's easier to instill confidence if you actually fill out the appropriate paperwork, do the Roth conversion, you do all this stuff for you. And I suspect that you do a very good job from our discussion and what I've read about you. But I'll just say that it might not be such an easy task.
Well, for me, setting up a Roth IRA is much scarier than teaching kids how to read.
Well, we all have our specialties, which is why you do what you do and I do what I do.
So do you help people set up the right type of IRAs, or how do they go about doing that?
Well, let's talk about resources, and for, let's say, people who are do-it-yourselfers, people who might not have sufficient funds to pay somebody like you or me, or people that do. I happen to believe that a well-informed consumer is the best consumer. So when I look for a professional service, I say, well, who has peer review articles? What's the science behind this? What's the math behind this? What do the reviewers say? And how can I get the best information I can? And I tend to go with people who have credentials, and who have done it in practice, and who write books and articles. So we have written many articles, and we finished what we think is the best book that is available. And I didn't hold back. I didn't say, oh, here's a little bit of information. If you want the good stuff, you have to pay us. No, I put it all out there. I got 2 wonderful co-authors. So it's going to sound self-serving, but I would say read my book. But in a way, it's not self-serving, because I'm not going to say buy the book. I'm going to say get it for free. And if you like, I'll give you a resource where you can get the book for free. So I would say first get the education, and then decide, okay, I can do this on my own, but I want help in this area, or I can do this on my own. I mean, very frankly, I don't think very many parents are qualified to teach their child with dyslexia how to read. And if I had the money, I wouldn't even think about it. I would go to you, or maybe somebody else that is, let's say, with qualifications, et cetera, et cetera. If I wouldn't do my own will or trust or estate plan, that sounds like a disaster. But maybe somebody has no money, and so they can read about it and then do it on their own with NOLO or something like that. In which case, if they get some great information from my book, I'm delighted. And the same with the financial strategies. A lot of people might not be able to afford what we charge, and I'm very cognizant of that. And we're not set up to be a clinic. But if I can give people free information for the do-it-yourselfer, or for the people who can't afford me, great. Or for the people who could and are interested, they can work with me.
Great. That's nice to know that you are available to help the person who is in a position, and also that you're cognizant of helping people who are not in a financial position to do it themselves, or to pay you.
But here, in my humble opinion, is the best resource for a parent with a child with a disability, in order to, let's say, educate themselves about their options. There's 3 authors. One is Debbie McFadden, who is, I would say, the top expert in the country on getting a child qualified for SSI, SSDI, vocational rehab, college tuition, etc. She was Commissioner of Disabilities under H.W. Bush. She was, to some extent, responsible for the Disabilities Act of 1990. And she has a small company that helps parents get their child qualified for these benefits. If you are a do-it-yourselfer, you can read about it in this book. If you like to hire somebody to do it, I can give her an unqualified recommendation. Although I will tell you honestly, it might sound like hype. She's going to get so busy soon, she's never going to be able to handle all the work that's going to come in. The next set of information that I mentioned was estate planning and getting your estate plan right, and getting the trust right, and getting the toggle trust right, et cetera, et cetera. If you're a Pennsylvania resident, that's an easy referral to Julia Steinbacher, one of the co-authors of this book. Or if you're not from Pennsylvania, potentially she has connections in other states. I have some, she has more. If you're interested in the financial part, again, that's the majority of this book. I've written 10 best-selling books. I have virtually the best of what I've written in these 10 books in here. The truth is, this would be very appropriate even for an IRA owner who doesn't have a child with a disability, but particularly with a child that does, with a parent that does. There's a lot of great information in here. And if you're a do-it-yourselfer, or if you're the advisor you have doesn't do this work, maybe you and your advisor together could come up with the best plan. Or, and frankly, there is a little plug for to see if you qualify to potentially work with us. But the starting point is getting this book. The other point, and by the way, where you can do this is at a website called disabledchildplanning.com/podcast. The other thing that is on there is on June 18th, we're going to have a 3-day summit, a virtual summit. Its cost is $0. And we're going to have a variety of experts, the 3 experts who wrote this book, including me, a bunch of other experts in a variety of areas. And also Tatiana McFadden is speaking. She's the celebrity speaker, one of the top athletes with a disability in the world. And I think that we're going to have just fabulous information. Again, you can get the book, you can get on the podcast. It's all free. That's my mission in life right now, is to get this information out there. Will I get some business from it? Probably. Will I get anywhere near what I've put it in terms of time and money? Not likely, but that's perfectly fine. For you, the parent of a child with some type of disability or on the spectrum of some type, I would be delighted if you took advantage of this free information, even if you didn't use anybody's services.
Thank you, Jim, for sharing all that. And we will have it on the screen as well so people can see it. And it is so generous of you, all that you are giving away to our listeners and the community as a whole to help people's lives change. I definitely would like to get a copy of the book. I do not feel like my trust is as efficient as it needs to be. And literally, I was thinking about this last night or the night before, that I need to get my mom's deed in order for her trust, as well as my own. So it's great that you are well-rounded and able to help people so that they can have the best option for their children, just like you want for your daughter. Thank you so much.
Do I have time for one more point?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay. You mentioned something that's very interesting, which is generational planning. A lot of times when, let's say that I meet clients in their 50s, 60s, 70s, sometimes younger, sometimes older, but probably more in that age range, or somebody like you who has an aging parent, and you're concentrating on your documents, a lot of times I can do more good for you by making changes to your parents' wills and trusts than I can getting yours right. For 2 reasons. Number one, they're going to die a lot sooner. Number two, a lot of times we can do things for them that make a huge difference. I'll give you an example. I mentioned Roth IRA conversions. Let's say you have an aging parent who needs to go to a retirement home, and to get in, it's $400,000 or $500,000 or whatever it is, and much of that can be attributed to medical expense. Well, let's just say you have a $400,000 medical expense, or even $200,000. Well, if you do a Roth IRA conversion for that same amount, you might not have any taxes or very few taxes, and that could make a difference of hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not for your parents, for you and your kids. So I love to do intergenerational planning, and if I had the option, I would do the planning for the parents of every client that I have, because sometimes that is such a great option. Or if you are if you're a grandparent of a child that has special needs or is on the spectrum of one or the other condition, there's a lot you can do. So you just brought that up. The idea of your intergenerational planning is very cool, and not a lot of people think to bring that up. And if your parents are such that, I have my will done, I'm not going to change anything, quit bothering me about it, I get it. But if they're a little bit more open-minded, maybe we could do something that's good for them, but great for the rest of the family.
Well, that sounds fantastic, because my mom just had a fall recently, and she said it aged her. And so that really got me thinking that we both have wills and trusts in place, but at the point of any of our demise, are they really going to be doing what we're hoping they're doing? I don't know. So,
I hate to say it, but if I'm in your position, I would want a competent estate attorney to not only look and advise on your estate plan, but I would want to see what the parents are. Because sometimes, like in the example that I just gave, it didn't cost grandma anything, because she gets the deduction anyway, and usually it just goes to waste. But a $200,000 or $400,000 Roth IRA conversion, if that ends up going to your kids down the road, that could be more than that, potentially, hundreds of thousands of dollars of savings. And we're not talking about from grandma to grandchild. We're talking about from Uncle Sam to you or your kids. Mm-hmm. So many opportunities here. And I mean, again, it might sound self-serving because I'm a very proactive advisor, but you really want somebody who is proactive. Most CPAs, even the competent ones, tend to be historians. And that's fine if you want somebody to prepare your 1040, but that's different than being a strategic planner.
So thank you, Jim, for your time and your dedication and coming on our show today. I really appreciate having you as a guest.
Well, I want to thank you because, you told me what goes into, putting these podcasts on and how much work it is. And I used to have a radio show, so I know how much work it is to get the guest and get the timing and everything else. And you're out there doing this. And I suspect that you're getting nowhere near the financial return, maybe $1 an hour compared to the work put in. So I'll just say thank you for what you are doing. And I just hope that the community is responsive and tunes into your podcast, because you are not only providing information about your service, but then for a bigger range of people that don't have just dyslexia, but have children with other problems.
Thank you. That's so kind of you.